Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep, trying to crack the code of artificial life. We're going to explore a really groundbreaking body of research that's starting to unlock the hidden rules we need to evolve digital creatures that are far more complex and intelligent than anything we've seen before.
And we're going to start with a puzzle. So, way back in 1994, Carl Sims blew everyone's minds by showing us these virtual creatures that could evolve their own bodies and brains. It was absolutely revolutionary. But fast forward 30 years, and it feels like the whole field of evolutionary robotics has kind of hit a wall. The creatures we're making today, they aren't that much more complex. So what are we missing? What's the secret ingredient?
Well, it turns out the answer, according to some pioneering research from Karine Miras, lies in completely shifting our focus. For decades, the field has been laser-focused on evolving just the body and the brain, almost in a vacuum. But her work argues that we've been overlooking two absolutely crucial interconnected factors: the huge influence of the environment and the hidden rules that are buried deep inside the creature's own genetic blueprint.
So the first big idea here is that we have to rethink the environment. You see, it's not just some static background like a painted set on a stage for these virtual creatures. No, it's an active participant. It's more like a sculptor, constantly shaping and molding life in real time.
Miraz's work shows us that the environment is always pushing and pulling on these creatures in all sorts of ways. I mean, it has a direct influence, right? Think about the difference between trying to walk on solid ground versus swimming through water. But it also has an indirect influence, through selection pressure, favoring some traits over others. And here's the kicker. It can even have a regulatory influence, literally telling genes when to switch on and when to switch off.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. The research uncovers this concept called genetic memory. What it shows is that a population's history, all its past struggles and adaptations, is never really forgotten. That environmental history leaves a permanent mark on its DNA, and that affects how it evolves for generations to come, even if it finds itself in a totally new world. This is so important because it means evolution isn't just about what's happening right now. It's deeply, deeply rooted in the past. So, okay, if the environment is this big, powerful, constantly changing thing, how on earth can a creature with a fixed set of genes possibly keep up? I mean, waiting around for generations for the right random mutation to pop up, that's not always going to be fast enough.
The solution is this incredibly elegant biological concept called phenotypic plasticity. The best way to think about it is like a biological toolkit. Instead of being locked into one single body plan, a single set of genes holds the potential to build multiple different bodies and brains, each one custom-tailored to a specific environment it runs into.
And this right here, this visualizes that idea perfectly. To really dig into this, Miras and her colleagues developed a special genetic encoding they called plasticoding. And as you can see, the exact same core DNA can build a totally different robot depending on the signals it gets from the environment. It's not just changing its behavior, it is physically rebuilding itself to match its world. It's incredible.
And the results? Well, they're just staggering. This ability to adapt on the fly isn't some neat little trick. It gives them a massive performance advantage. In experiments where the environment had changing seasons, these plastic robots were a full 58% faster than the robots that were stuck with fixed bodies. This is proof that real-time adaptation is an absolute game changer for survival.
But is this incredible adaptability a free lunch? I mean, a 58% performance boost sounds almost too good to be true, right? Well, this next part of the research, which was published in the super prestigious journal Scientific Reports, that's part of the Nature portfolio, it investigates that exact question. Can a creature really be a jack of all trades without being a master of none?
And it turns out the ability to be super flexible comes with all these hidden costs and trade-offs. These are things that are almost impossible to isolate and study in the real world, but in these carefully designed digital worlds, we can see them plain as day. Plasticity isn't free. Evolution always has to pay a price at the genetic level.
The key insight here is that the very genetic machinery that allows for all this flexibility can also backfire. See, genes don't work in isolation. This diagram shows how their interactions, a concept we call epistasis, can create conflicts. Activating one really useful trait might accidentally mess something else up, and that can end up hurting the creature's overall performance.
So that discovery forces us to dig even deeper. If the way genes interact is part of the problem, then we have to look at the genetic blueprint itself, the encoding, the artificial DNA that's used to write the instructions for building the creature in the first place.
What this research uncovered is that the very language you use to write the genetic code has its own built-in bias. It's kind of like a sculptor choosing their material. It's just easier to carve certain shapes out of a block of marble and other shapes out of a lump of clay. Well, in the same way, some genetic languages make it way easier for evolution to discover certain body plans over others.
And you can see that bias so clearly in these images. On the left, a really common way of writing the genetic code, called CPPN, just keeps evolving creatures that are stuck in one tiny region of possibilities. But on the right, a more biologically realistic blueprint called MRGRN is able to explore this huge, diverse universal potential shapes. It just goes to show that our choice of code directly limits, or unleashes, the creativity of evolution.
And this graph shows a really fascinating evolutionary trade-off. That red line, the biased encoding, it gets pretty good, pretty fast. But the blue and green lines, the more diverse encodings, they start off slower, but they just keep exploring new possibilities. And that diversity, that's the real key to long-term survival. A high bias is great for solving one problem quickly, but diversity is what lets a population survive the unexpected.
The research found that these different biases lead to completely different evolutionary answers to the exact same problem. The CPPN encoding, for example, it consistently makes these stable, four-legged spiders that move in a very controlled but slow way. Meanwhile, another encoding, called an L system, produces these fast, chaotic, rolling snakes. Neither one is necessarily better. They're just different solutions, shaped entirely by the bias in their DNA.
Okay, so to truly understand all these biases and the costs of adaptation, we have to go to the deepest level possible. We need to figure out how individual genes are actually talking to each other. We basically have to crack open the black box of evolution.
And this is where we come back to that really powerful idea from earlier, epistasis. It's the idea that the effect of any single gene depends on all the other genes around it. It's not as simple as A plus B equals C. It's more like A and B together create something totally new and unpredictable. It's the secret grammar of the genome.
And in a remarkable study published in the IEEE Transactions on Evolutionary Computation, which is a top-tier journal in this field, Miras did something pretty incredible. The research took this complex analytical tool that experimental biologists use to study real DNA, and for the first time, applied it to these artificial creatures. What this analysis does is it makes the invisible visible. This heat map is basically a map of the genetic social network. It shows us precisely which pairs of genes are working together, that's what we call a synergistic effect, and which ones are working against each other, an antagonistic effect. All of a sudden, that black box of evolution starts to become explainable. So the crucial point here is that this tool is like a Rosetta Stone for artificial genetics. It lets us move beyond just watching evolution happen to actually understanding its hidden rules. For the first time, we can literally see how evolution rewires the genetic network and connect those changes directly to changes in body shape. This is the key to making the evolution of AI not just powerful, but also predictable and understandable.
And when you take a step back and look at it all together, this cohesive body of work shows how every one of these discoveries, the environment's role, the power and the price of plasticity, the hidden biases in the code, they are all interconnected. To build truly complex artificial life, we have to consider this incredibly intricate dance between an organism's genes and the world that it lives in.
And this leaves us with a final, really provocative thought. If we're learning to decode the evolution of digital life, if we're making its hidden rules visible and understandable, we might just be getting a much clearer glimpse into the fundamental source code of life itself.